promised our guest speaker that there would be sunshine, and I'm delighted that the promise has come to pass. We are deeply honoured indeed to have as our special guest speaker today Pierre Joannon. He has published several historical books on Ireland, including Histoire de l'Irlande et des Irlandais, and also one on Michael Collins. He's the co-founder of Études Irlandaises and is president and founder of the Ireland Fund of France. And since 1973, he has been Consul General of Ireland in 5 southeast départements in France. Would you please give a very warm welcome to our guest speaker today, Pierre Joannon.
TDs, senators, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. If I had known 35 years ago, when I was writing the first and only biography of the big fellow, that I would be addressing you today over this grave, I would have been overwhelmed by a feeling of pride, gratitude, not to mention more than a little anxiety. Pride, because it seems to me that this is a recognition of the fact that my book, which has had several reprints, is cherished by all those in France, and they are numerous, who love Ireland and sympathize with her struggle, past and present. Gratitude, because I am aware of the significance of the tragedy which took place in Vilnabla on the 22nd of August 1922, 89 years ago. And finally, anxiety, because I follow in the footsteps of so many distinguished orators who have described what Michael Collins meant to them and the significance of his words and deeds for today's Ireland. With such illustrious predecessors, one approaches the task with more than some humility and caution, especially when one is not a member of the Irish tribe, or should I say rather was not, until 1997, when Irish citizenship was conferred upon me in recognition of services rendered to the state. Of course, like most, I admire in Collins the supreme communicator, the revolutionary leader, the military strategist, the man who won the war, as Arthur Griffith said in the Dáil, to placate those of his former colleagues who were attempting to downgrade Collins's role during the War of Independence. But above all, I admire the heroic and lucid statesman who signed the 1921 treaty, knowing only too well that, in his own words, he was signing his death warrant. As with all treaties, the Articles of Agreement signed by Griffith and Collins on the 6th of December 1921 were a compromise between harsh realities and unfulfillable aspirations. The big fellow knew that he had obtained the best possible deal on the day. He knew that he had obtained for his country the freedom to achieve freedom. And he knew that he would be torn apart, vilified, and most probably killed by former comrades in arms, inspired by the strong sense of patriotism, but at the same time by the sheer folly of an impossible dream. Convinced that it was in the best interest of the country, he was determined at all costs to win his case. Armchair Democrats of the 21st century are somewhat disturbed by the fact that Collins was not only the chairman of the provisional government and the self-appointed commander-in-chief of the army, but also the president of the Supreme Council of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, an oath-bound secret society which he took care to reinforce and reorganize in July 1922. And so what? A civil war is not a courteous exchange of views between distinguished and well-educated members of parliament. in an orderly House of Representatives. It's a bloody struggle, a fight to the death between brothers and erstwhile comrades in arms, involving the possible destruction of the fragile, nascent state. In order to be victorious, the need was for a unity of purpose and a consolidation of command, which explains why Collins took all powers in his own hands. Was he a dictator for all that, or was he a would-be dictator? Probably because I am French, I tend to consider such a question to be both misplaced and irrelevant. In 1945, and again in 1958, many French people were of the opinion that de Gaulle was seeking to establish a dictatorship in France, and a politician with a bright future even wrote that his constitutional innovations and political practices were nothing but a permanent coup d'etat. Leaving aside the speculation of commentators of the history which might have been, let's stick to the reality that, IRB or no IRB, the legacy of Collins is both constitutional and democratic. The big fellow, no more than the long fellow for all that, cannot be accused of having planted the seeds of dictatorship in Ireland. The contrary is in fact the case. Kevin O'Higgins, who was to share the same fate as Collins, was, in my opinion, absolutely right in saying of his deceased leader, he died to ensure that the newly won right of government of the people by the people shall not perish from the land. He died to establish the foundation of a state, to vindicate the first principle of democratic government. He died that the Irish nation might live and grow. The Ireland of today is obviously very different from the Ireland of 1922. To start with, Civil War politics are finally and at last dead and gone, and thank God for that. To demonstrate one's admiration for the big fellow, one doesn't have automatically to vilify the long fellow. In a review published in the Irish Times, the former Irish ambassador to France, Tiger Sullivan, wrote of my book on Collins, and I quote, "The author plainly sympathizes with his hero throughout this struggle, and it is to his credit that it does so without feeling the necessity to denigrate de Valera. We Irish are ever ready to apportion blame, and perhaps it takes the dispassionate outside observer to show us that there are sometimes problems that transcend the capacity of any individual, even of statesmen, even of heroes." End of quote. Now that the poison of Civil War politics have evaporated, what inspiration can the Ireland of today draw from Collins' example and achievements? Confronted with his difficult task, your Minister for Finance might find inspiration in the fact that, in addition to his military position of Adjutant General, Director of Intelligence, and Director of Organization, Michael Collins was also the most unlikely Minister for Finance in the Dáil Éireann government. In this capacity, he was the main architect of the very successful Dáil Éireann loan, which was essential to finance the perilous business of a revolutionary government on the run. His high standards of efficiency and financial acumen could be a model for his present-day colleague. It is not only the Minister for Finance, but indeed all Irishmen and women who should consider the big fellow as a role model in the difficult circumstances in which Ireland finds itself at the moment. His moral and physical courage, his integrity, his administrative skills, his efficiency and sense of purpose, and his impatience with people who were not of the highest caliber are qualities that are needed today as much as they were needed then. He who never suffered fools gladly would have sent straight to hell the prophets of gloom and doom who are moaning and groaning that the country is banjaxed, that it will never recover, that it has sold its soul and lost its sovereignty. Collins heard similar nonsense in December 1921 and the first half of 1922. And as he did at the time, he would today resort to the most robust language to reawaken the country's combative spirit. Can we not concentrate and unite, not on the negative, but on the positive, he would say. And he would add, whatever the name of the political phraseology, we cannot restore Ireland without a great united effort. And to the doomsayers who are lamenting the loss of sovereignty, he would, again and again, hammer home his belief. Complete national freedom can now be ours, and nobody but ourselves can prevent us achieving it. We shall no longer have anyone but ourselves to blame if we fail to use the freedom we have won to achieve full freedom. May his voice be heard today as clearly as it was during the crucial years in which the Irish state was founded, out of the ashes and misery of a civil war which took his life, depriving his country of one of his most gifted sons. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that a marvellous overview from somebody who has studied Michael Collins and studied Irish history? And I know you all appreciated it. You were rapturously listening to everything that Pierre said. Give him another wonderful round. Just a few announcements now,